just us, boys and girls. I've had several adults tell me lately they've been listening in, so I'm not sure what to think about that. I'll just be really glad that I don't know who all listens. But boys and girls, I hope that you are ready this morning to hear the next part of what God has in His Word. As we are going through the book of Genesis and we are following the timeline there, we talked about Abraham. And we talked about his son Isaac, and we talked about how Isaac obeyed when his dad was going to offer him on an altar, and how God wanted to prove to Abraham just how much Abraham had to love God over Isaac. We talked about that. Then we said Isaac grew up. He was about 40, and he needed a wife. So last week we talked about the fact that a servant traveled, kept his promise to Abraham, prayed for God's will, God showed His will, and Isaac got a wife named Rebecca. Well, now he was 40 last week. In a week, he's turned 20 years older. He's now 60. The poor guy, we're speeding along in his life. Well, Isaac is 60, and he and Rebecca still don't have any kids. Remember, we've talked about God's promise to Abraham about how he's going to have so many children, but this definitely seems like a slow process. So he's 60, and Rebecca's still not been able to have any kids. So, well, what Peter's normally got this answer for me. Peter, what should Isaac do if there's something out of his control? What should he do? That's right, he should pray. So Isaac does. He goes to God and he prays. He says, God, I'm 60 now. Rebecca hasn't been able to have any children. You've made us this promise, Lord. We know you're going to fulfill this promise. We've seen you at work in many other ways, but she doesn't have any children. Well, God answers, and Rebecca starts to realize this. She starts to feel it this is her first pregnancy, but she realizes it's not feeling normal. She feels like there's a war going on inside of her. I missed whatever Peter just did, so, but she realizes there's a war. She's like, I don't think having a baby is supposed to feel like a war, so what do you think she does, boys and girls, when something's not going right? Peter, what does she do? What does she have to do? She has to pray. And when she prays, she gets a startling answer from God. At least when I was, again, boys and girls, sometimes I try to put myself in the shoes of the Bible characters, and I think, wow. She prays, and God's answer to her is, the reason is because there's two countries inside of you. Two countries? People have babies. They don't have countries. Two nations. And she's like, two. What does that mean, Peter? If there's two, there's going to be two babies. She's going to have twins. Wow, exciting. Twins, right? What they're warring on the inside of her, so she's kind of a little nervous about that. And unfortunately, that's kind of how life's going to go for them. They're not going to be the best of brothers as far as being the best of friends. But sure enough, Rebecca has these two babies. She has Esau. He was the firstborn. The Bible tells us that he came out hairy. Yes, Peter would know about that, except Peter, you weren't real hairy when you were born either. You were pink-skinned and very teeny. It's true. The teeniest little pink-skinned cute critter. All right, so in Genesis chapter 25, boys and girls, last week we did 24, which was 67 verses long. Chapter 25 is only about half that long, and actually we pick up the story where we started today was in verse 19. But right now I'm going to read to you verse 23. It says, And the Lord said unto her, Two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Boys and girls, that's kind of backwards, especially for their culture, that the older sibling was going to serve the younger. Usually the older one is the one who got all of the power and the rule. But God says before these two boys are even born, that the younger is going to rule over the older. Okay, verse 24, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Verse 25, and the first came out red all over, like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. The Bible gives us the description of what Esau looked like. And then came Jacob. Well, as they grew up, Jacob was the favorite of his mom. He tended to stay around. He liked to cook. He liked to be the homebody. He liked to help around the house. He and his mom got along great. Well, Esau, he was the mighty hunter. He went out to hunt. He was the woodsman. He liked the nature. He liked outdoors. He was all about that. The Bible tells us that his father Isaac loved the meat that Esau would bring home to him so that he could enjoy the meat, have it cooked up for him. Well, one day Esau, he goes out, he's hunting, and he's hunting, and he's hunting, and he doesn't get anything. I don't know if any of you boys and girls have ever been hunting or fishing before. My father often reminds my brother that fishing is fishing, not catching. There's no promise that you're actually going to catch a fish. You're just going out to try. Kind of that idea with hunting. Just because you're hunting doesn't mean you're actually going to kill something. But Esau comes in. He's tired. He's hot. He's sweaty. It has been a long day. Think about it, boys and girls. Think of maybe a summer day when you have just been playing outside all day long and you are exhausted and you're hungry and you come inside. Well, Esau gets back and he smells, oh, the stew. It smells, maybe it was made with bamboo. I'm not real sure. This is for humans though, but you can picture bamboo. Peter will picture bamboo and the smell of fresh cut bamboo. How about that? And boys and girls, we'll think of some stew. So, or anything you like to eat. Maybe it's pizza. That might appeal to some of you more than stew. But Esau gets home and he smells that. He's like, oh, that just smells so good. I'm so hungry. So Jacob, he probably just serves it. No, he doesn't serve it right up for him, boys and girls. Now, I hope you don't treat your brothers and sisters like this, but he says, in order to get the stew, you have to trade me. Okay, maybe you've made a trade before. Some of you like to do that at lunchtime. Swap with your friends what mom sent you and what their mom sent them, and you like to trade. But it wasn't an equal trade. It wasn't a fair trade. It wasn't a good trade. But Jacob said, if you want some of this food, some of this stew, trade me your birthright. A birthright. Yeah, exactly, Peter. Some of these kids are probably, what's a birthright? Basically, think of the idea of an inheritance, the amount of money and possessions and leadership and position that he would get from his father. Being the oldest, he would have been presumed to be the leader. Now, if you remember, boys and girls, we read the verse in the Bible that told us that the younger was going to rule over the older. So we do know that that's in God's plan, but God's plan doesn't involve trickery. God's plan doesn't involve a sneaky trade, but Jacob did a sneaky trade. So he says, trade me your birthright. Okay, boys and girls, food we eat today, we're going to have to eat again tomorrow. Now, we need it today. It's important, but it doesn't stay with us. It doesn't last. We've got to eat again tomorrow and the next day and probably 3 or 4 times during each day for something that's going to last forever. Well, Esau makes a poor choice. He says, you know what? I'll trade you that birthright for this food. He says, because if I die of starvation, who cares about a birthright anyways? Boys and girls, he still traded something very temporary for something that had a lot longer lasting. Well, he traded the birthright. In verse number 35, it says, 34, then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. He considered it worthless. It's like, it's worthless to me now. Boys and girls, don't sacrifice what's eternal, what's long-lasting for something that's temporal, something that will change. Don't try to trick your brothers and sisters, okay? Some of us who are the older siblings in our family may have tried to trade a penny for a dime before because a penny's bigger, right? Or maybe a nickel for a dime. A nickel's bigger than a dime. But those of us who are older and smarter know that a dime is worth more. Okay? I'm not talking about changing coins with your siblings, boys and girls. I'm talking about being the kind of sibling, though, that God would want you to be. Are you kind? Are you loving? Are you helpful? Do you do what you should do, or do you try to trick? Do you try to stumble? Okay, now we know there's a place for practical jokes. Okay, this wasn't a practical joke, though, between Jacob and Esau. This was something very serious. And Esau was willing to give it up for just some soup. Well, boys and girls, I hope that when you think about Jacob and Esau, that you think about how God has a plan, but we don't have to be tricky to get God's plan. And we can be kind to those around us. His brother was hungry. He could have just given his brother some food. It's not like he was going to sell it, okay? He wasn't going to make money off of it. He was going to probably give it to him later anyways for dinner. But boys and girls, how are you treating your siblings? Are you treating them right? You say, I'm an only child. I got that one covered. What about your friends? What about your cousins? What about those around you? Do you treat them with love and kindness, or are you always trying to step on them to get higher up? And I don't mean physically. I mean the idea of putting them down so that you can be higher up. It's pretty easy to do, to be cutting and sarcastic, but God calls us to be kind and loving towards one another. How do you treat the people around you? I hope you treat